This is Shifting Our Schools, episode 99, Giving Students Space to Fail.
Be flexible with your time and leave some time in the schedule for kids to fail, because that's really what's needed in order to, they really need the time and the space to try something without the risk of having it, negatively affect their scores.
Listen up, educators. Are you looking to take your classroom to the next level? The technological shift in education is happening right now. If you're looking to integrate technology into your classroom, you're in the right place. Welcome to Shifting Our Schools with your host, Jeff Udick.
Well, welcome back to Shifting Our Schools. Thank you for listening and subscribing in your favorite podcast player. If you aren't subscribed, you can do that now. Just search for Shifting Our Schools in your favorite podcast player. You can find us on Spotify as well, which is kind of cool. And also, if you have a Amazon Echo, you can just ask Echo to play the latest episode of Shifting Our Schools, and we will be in your house with you. That's pretty cool. This technology stuff is pretty amazing, I tell you. I'm loving it. So great to see that 22 of you have taken the time to rate us in iTunes. Thank you to those who have taken that time to rate us or leave a comment either on our website or on other websites or on an episode or talking about us in social spaces using the hashtag SOS Podcast. That's our hashtag, SOS Podcast. Thank you for helping us to continue to build a community of learners. That is what we are all about, building a community of learners to support each other and help us spread the word about our podcast. So thank you for listening, and thank you for continuing to spread the word about Shifting Our Schools. This month, I'm so excited that we are going to start something new here on the podcast, and that is every month our goal is to give away something free to our listening community. And over the last few months, I've been talking with some different people on how we might do this. And so what we've decided is we're going to do a monthly giveaway where you'll be able to answer some questions as we build our community and learn from each other. Every podcast episode, we are going to ask a question that is based on the conversations inside that podcast. And then at the end of the month, we'll draw a name from a hat and decide who gets the free giveaway. So this month, we'll be giving away a copy of the book, Classroom Management in the Digital Age by Patrick Green and Heather Dowd, to one lucky listener. I am great friends with Patrick and Heather. You can hear them on previous podcasts here on Shifting Our Schools. And hopefully we're going to have an opportunity to hear more from them together about some of the strategies also in the book. So this month, the month of November, Classroom Management in the Digital Age book can be yours if you enter to win this month's questions. And for the entire month of November, we're going to be asking you to leave us your thoughts on different questions on our Flipgrid account. At the end of the month, we'll put all the names into a hat and we'll choose a name. And this is the cool part. Every week we ask a different question, which means every week you could enter your name again. So at the end of the month, you could actually have your name in the hat 4 different times if you've gone to Flipgrid and left us 4 different responses. Now, how do you leave us a Flipgrid response? Well, hopefully you've used Flipgrid, as it's always rated one of my top apps of the year, and it still is. Fantastic app to use with students, and I love promoting it here on the podcast as well. You can leave us your Flipgrid response by going to sospodcast.org and clicking on Flipgrid at the top, or using the Flipgrid code. If you just go to flipgrid.com, it's going to ask for a code. That code is SOS Podcast, and you can do that on your phone or any mobile device as well. So our Flipgrid code is SOS Podcast, or head over to sospodcast.org and you'll see Flipgrid up at the top. Those are ways that you can leave your response to this question. We will also be using your responses in upcoming episodes, so you'll get to hear all of the responses from everyone who answers our questions in upcoming episodes of Shifting Our Schools, as well as so that we can continue to learn from each other. And that's really what I'm trying to promote here, is all of us, we all are doing amazing things in our classroom, and I just want us to continue to learn from each other. This week, our guest talks all about project-based learning And as you know, here at Shifting Our Schools, I'm constantly going on and on about creating highly structured, loosely organized learning environments in our classroom when we're using technology. Highly structured, loosely organized. So this week's question is, what structures do you put in place in your own project-based learning environment to make sure students are successful? In order to win a free copy of the book, Classroom Management in the Digital Age, head over to sospodcast.org and click on Flipgrid at the top, or go to flipgrid.com and type in the code SOSPodcast to leave your response to this week's question. Again, the question is, what structures do you put in place in your own project-based learning environment to make sure students are successful? I'm so excited to hear all the different ways educators create structure for students to be successful in their own classroom. And this week, Chris Butler and I have a chat with Adam Polluck, who teaches in Hangzhou, China, at a school based on project-based learning. Adam walks us through how this innovative school creates 32-week project-based learning experiences for their students. You're really going to love this. And with that, on with the show. Welcome to Shifting Our Schools. It's great to have Adam and Chris on the line today. It's great. Adam's coming all the way from Shanghai, my old stomping grounds, so that's fantastic. And Chris is coming from the big town of Hood River. How are you today, Chris?
Big city. I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you? Good.
And you said you were having a good day today. Do you want to talk a little bit about your day?
Yeah. So the last couple of days in the district, we have Tech PD days set up at the high school because it's their first year of going fully one-to-one with kids. So trying our best to support the teachers as they roll out that plan and how do they move forward and do some really cool things with the technology. So this is our second round of Tech PD, and it's a 3-day block. And basically what we did is it's sort of a push-in model.
Cool.
But we sent out an invite basically to the teachers to sign up one of the 3 days for a half a period. It's a block schedule, so about 45 minutes. Just to meet face-to-face with a tech coach, whether it's me or we have a Apple consultant here that's working with us, and then they have a couple of in-building coaches. So they just set up a time to meet and sit with us, either sit with us during the plan period or to have us come in and observe during their class period. It just kind of offers some observations, feedback. Hey, I saw you trying to do a cool reflection with the students at the end. You might try Flipgrid next time. This would be a cool way to get the students more engaged in their reflection. Or I see you doing some journaling in your class. Here's a tool that you can use. So just offering them real-time feedback on what they're doing, what they're looking for. So it's not a PD where we're teaching everybody the same stuff all at once. It's very much what that individual teacher needs right now in real time. So that personalized learning for adults.
That's great. I love that idea.
And so what kind of the next step in that is, and we've already got a lot of these set up with some teachers already, is based on what our conversation today, would maybe you want to do a co-teaching with me in class and help you support the learning with the kids. Maybe you want to have another session with one of the coaches, that sort of thing. So I set up with a pretty brand new teacher, a PE teacher, but her health class. She wants to do podcasting with her kids as a way of them showing their learning. So I'm like, let's get after that. Yeah. So it's been really fun. It's been good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Glad you had a great day. I had a good day. I was in a training all day with world language teachers and science teachers. And so there was a couple of moments where I don't remember what I said, but the whole room went silent and you're just like mic drop,
right. Yep.
Showing them a tool or something. So it's always a good day.
Mind's blown.
Yeah, it's always good when you have one of those moments today. But well, we're really excited to have Adam here. Welcome, Adam, to Shifting Our Schools. And just to remind you, Adam, that this podcast goes out to about 7 million people. So don't miss it.
big audience, yeah.
Or 3. It's somewhere between 7 million and 3. We're not sure. So somewhere in there. A couple hundred people usually download it, and we're very grateful for all our listeners to listen. But welcome, and kind of give us your story in the big city. Well, it's actually a small city in China, by China standards. Isn't
Yeah.
Hangzhou is kind of a, small Chinese city of how many millions of people?
Yeah, I think we got 8 million people in Hangzhou, which is about an hour away from Shanghai. And thank you guys both for inviting me to be a guest on the podcast. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
As I mentioned to you before the show started, yeah, it's actually my first podcast, but I'm a listener, and I've always wanted to share some of the cool things that we're doing at our school. So I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Talk a little bit about how you got into education. How'd you end up there? What's been your path?
Yeah, it's kind of been a winding path. My first teaching job was actually a ski and snowboard instructor. Kind of my high school job during the winter.
Yeah, nice.
At this local place just outside Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
Where I'm from. So it's kind of just like a cool thing to do after school for a couple hours. The pay was horrible. I think I got $6 an hour, which was only when I was teaching lessons. So sometimes during early and late season, I'd get there and not have any lessons and not go home with any money, but definitely go home with a few good stories and as much time on the slopes as I wanted.
There you go. Yeah.
And then from there, I joined Teach for America after university. So I taught for 2 years in a Title I school in Charlotte, North Carolina. I did a brief stint with a basketball team, actually. After that, I got a cool opportunity with an NBA Development League team. And then, at that point, I knew that I wanted to move abroad. I had a friend who taught in China and said it's just a really happening place. This was back in 2008.
Cool.
And it seemed at the time, and it still seems, that China is kind of what everybody's talking about. It's always in the news, especially now in the last couple of years. And I kind of just wanted to see what was happening. I wanted to see how the country had grown over the past couple decades. I knew that there were as many people learning English in China as the entire population of the US. So I knew there were a lot of opportunities for that. I got connected to a school, a very small private school that taught English to Chinese students. And I took a big leap of faith. I bought a one-way ticket and ended up in Hangzhou, where I've been for the last 11 years or so.
Wow.
From there, I started work at an international school that has a really cool model. So this is an international school that's based in Hong Kong, and they have a special campus for their 9th graders that they built in Hangzhou. And it's the first opportunity for these students to live away from home. So it's a special 1-year boarding campus. And we do a lot of cool stuff. So we kind of, because we're far away from the mothership, we kind of get to take a lot of risks. And I'm really excited to talk about some of the stuff we do.
Yeah, cool.
Very cool. So you only have 9th graders, and it's a boarding school. So you have a room or something there at school, or do teachers take turns, or how does that work?
Yeah, we have 6 teachers. They're called head of house. Okay. And they oversee 1/6 of the student population. They live on campus. We have a director and a assistant director. And then we employ 12, we call them coach mentors. Okay. And they are recently graduated Chinese people who oversee kind of like what an RA would do at a college university.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Making sure the kids get up on time and making sure they're getting to meals, and they run a session called Family Time, which is an opportunity for students to come together and talk about how they're doing outside of classes. So we've got a great staff of people that live here on campus. I don't. I live off campus, but we all have, I'd say, more duties than you would in a typical school.
Yeah.
Cool. And
That's awesome.
all your students are Chinese or Hong Kong?
Yeah. So our school promotes bilingual education. Most of our students, I'd say about 90% of our students are English first language speakers.
Okay.
And then I'd say about 30% of them are also Chinese speakers from birth.
Okay.
And then the rest of them are a variation. So we've got maybe 20% of our students have very limited Chinese skills. So it's kind of all over the board. But the language of instruction is English, but we highly promote Mandarin. And in Hong Kong, the language that's spoken is Cantonese. So there's quite a few languages going on. It's a really exciting and dynamic place to be.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah.
Cool.
So Adam, we originally connected, and I'm not even sure how this timeline actually breaks down. So I think you were listening to the Project Based Awesome podcast that Aaron and I were doing, and then we connected via the mastermind group on Voxer. Is that correct, or was it Twitter first?
Yeah. I don't remember.
Somewhere, something like that. But
yeah, I know that.
Yeah. And so you shared some of the things that you were doing in your class, and we really wanted to get you on that podcast. It just never worked out, but I was super stoked. Like, you were going through things, I was like, oh, that's awesome, I want to hear more about that. So I'd love you to kind of talk about your classroom, what's going on in there, kind of just walk us through, because you're doing a lot of the project-based stuff, but it was really cool when you were breaking it down for me before. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, we're a little bit apart from the main campus, so we get to take a lot of risks. And one of those, so a major shift that we made a couple of years ago was taking 4 normally standalone subjects, and those are social studies, arts, science, and design. And we basically run a series of interdisciplinary projects throughout the year, combining those subjects. So my specialism is social studies, but I rarely teach social studies as it happens in a conventional classroom. It's always in the context of some other subject. So we really push experiential learning. We make sure that what the students do is a really in-depth project that has a lot of authenticity. And we really push student voice and choice, student inquiry. So we're really trying to make sure that what students are doing in the classroom is what they're interested in, and based on the knowledge and skills that they already come in with. For example,
how are you making sure they're hitting standards and stuff? Like, are you a standards-based school? Like, how do you keep track of that? That's so awesome.
Yeah. So our campus in Hong Kong uses International Baccalaureate, and that is kind of what we're modeled after.
Okay. But
we've realized over the years that there's certain things that we want to do that are a little different. So we've got that as our general historical framework, but we've kind of pulled back from that and developed our own curriculum.
Okay.
But a lot of the standards that we hit, for example, in my classroom, we want to test the knowledge and understanding that students develop throughout the unit. We want to test the research skills. We want to measure the communication. We want to measure critical thinking. And we have standards and rubrics that we go through with students to make sure they're hitting those targets.
Okay. So can you walk us through kind of an example? Like, what does your class look like? What are the kids doing? What are you doing?
Sure. So right now, I am co-teaching a class with the design teacher called Designing Social Change.
Mm.
And
love it.
we are using design thinking, and we are challenging students to identify a current issue in China that they connect with, that they care about, and design a solution to it.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
how we started that unit is we invited some of our Chinese coworkers to introduce a topic that they're familiar with. And we had a series of roundtable discussions with our students so that they could get an overview of some of the current issues that are happening in China. For example, one of them was feminism and how women in China are treated in the workplace and how those attitudes are changing. So we had these series of roundtable discussions by somebody who really understands it, somebody who's from China. And then from there, we had students do a little bit of their own research, identify a few topics that they'd be interested in learning about. Then they found students in the room, and this is a room of about 30 students. They found another student who was also interested in that topic. And then we've taken them through the design cycle, beginning with building empathy. And that's kind of the key here. And what I found that students often overlook or move too quickly past is that building empathy phase.
Mm.
And especially our students, having grown up in Hong Kong, which is part of China, but obviously has a long history of being under British rule. And these students are coming in with oftentimes very different attitudes than local students that you'd find here in Hangzhou. So we really have to spend a lot of time in that building empathy phase so that they can develop an understanding of what people in this city, how their attitudes are and experiences are.
Yeah.
So you talked about, like, one of the research questions might be like feminism or females in the workplace in China. What are some of the other questions that kids have kind of come up with? What are some of the other ones that are kind of floating around your classroom?
Yeah, so there's a variety of issues. Students have looked into, let's see, we've had animal rights. We have had left behind children. So left behind children are students whose parents have had to leave to go to a bigger city for work, which is a common theme in China right now. And students are left behind in their rural villages, usually to be raised by their grandparents.
Yep.
There are lots of issues that deal with the wealth gap in China right now.
Yeah.
The last couple of decades have seen many people become rich, but a lot of people stay in poverty. Yeah, some of the other topics that have been covered by students have been access to healthcare. We've had a lot of students that are interested in sustainability. So we've had students cover single-use plastic, water quality. Some students, and I found this topic to be really interesting, they've noticed, what's going on with the protests in Hong Kong right now. We've had some students look into the relationship between Hong Kong and mainland China, and they've looked into some of the issues of discrimination that occur between both sides.
What a great project! Like your point, that when you're going through the design cycle, that ability to be okay being in that empathy stage, when you bring up a hot topic like that, to be able to basically, you really have to dig in and understand the other side before you can ever try to figure out what a solution might be.
Yeah.
Definitely. We often see students kind of rush past that phase because they're so excited about, they want to build an app.
Yeah, they want to fix it.
Right. Yeah.
And then they rush past the empathy phase. They start learning some coding and learning how to how to design an app, and then they get so far into it that they somebody asks them a question. Well, have you tested the fact that people would actually use this app, or like what can you tell me more about why this solution is needed? And then they have kind of a disheartened realization that actually the whole premise of the app is not really in line with what people really want.
Yeah.
Or need. Yeah.
Yeah. So Adam, that kind of brings me to a couple, some thoughts, a question. So I hear you talk about some keys to make this style of learning work: the design phase, the design thinking phase, the really digging into the empathy work and that sort of thing. If I'm one of our 10 or 15 listeners of this podcast, and I'm sitting at home and I'm going like, this sounds awesome, but how do I go about doing this? What would you say are some keys to being successful? Or even talk about like, I tried this and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
To put you on the spot.
I think we're in a pretty good place with this unit, but this is like the 6th iteration of this unit, and it has not been, A to B to C to D. Like we've really done a lot of hard thinking. We've had to go back to square one a few times, and I guess the first piece of advice, and this is advice that I got when I started project-based learning, is it's not going to be pretty. And you really have to be willing.
I love that.
Yeah. You really have to be willing. You have to know that going in, and it does help to have an administration that is willing to give you the time to fail, just as we should be willing to give our students time to fail and be understanding.
Love that.
Well, what I'm hearing you saying is you almost have to be willing as a teacher to take your project design through the design cycle yourself. Like you have to be able to iterate, go back, replan, blow something up. That didn't work. This worked. How do I grab that piece? How do I grab this piece? And understand that it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right. That it's a constant work in process.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I guess in that way, in a sort of metacognitive way, we're sort of developing empathy for our students, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I would say making sure there's an authentic purpose. So this unit culminates in a charity gala. And the students are working towards an event where they are presenting their solution in front of the entire staff at our school. So they come around and they ask questions to the students. What's your issue and what solution did you create to address this issue? How did you test it? What process did you go through? And our students describe that to the teachers, and the teachers are actually given $50 of play money, and they choose which projects to donate to. And then the projects that receive the most money, our school actually donates real money to the charity of their choice.
Wow, how cool is that? Cool. That's great.
So yeah, in that way, that charity gala is sort of a simulation, but it is authentic because the students are actually receiving money if they come in first place.
How powerful is that? That's cool.
So what does a typical day look like for one of your students? Like, are they going to a traditional 50-minute period or a 3-block, bell rings, go on to the next class? Or have you changed the structure of what a day looks like from a student end in order to do these kind of project-based approaches?
Yeah. A day looks super busy, and we have extended periods for a lot of the students, depending on what type of unit we're working with. Some units require students to go off campus and do interviews with people in the community at a location that's not particularly close to school. So for those units, we have class periods as long as 4 hours long.
Wow.
And that would be the whole morning. So students would have the opportunity to leave campus at 8 a.m., travel for 45 minutes, conduct interviews at a factory or
Company or
a tourist
yeah.
location, and then come back to campus. And yeah, that we've got somebody working pretty hard to manage the schedule. And I know that's probably not feasible at a lot of schools, but having that flexibility of being able to have short periods, long periods, can really make a big impact on what students are able to do.
I like that.
That's great.
And because this is a boarding school, we have 6 days a week of lessons. So yeah, students are working pretty hard, but we give them nice long vacations, and the teachers get nice long vacations too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It goes both ways, right? How many
Yeah.
students do you have? How what are we talking? Your class size, like your like traditional class size, and how many students total in your school?
Yeah, so we have 113 students in our school, 113 ninth graders, and class sizes range from as few as 6 in a specific level of a Chinese class to as high as 30 in one of our interdisciplinary project-based learning units.
Okay.
So when you're going through these units like this, how are you making sure that you're weaving in your social studies, I don't know, for lack of a better word, standards or outcomes, or the stuff that IB says, and if that's kind of what you've adopted, how do you make sure kids are still hitting those in a project like this?
Yeah, so we actually, and I know this sounds crazy, but we actually don't have any required content that we have to teach in social studies in year 9. We work with the school back in Hong Kong to make sure that there's no direct overlap, and rather we're able to pick up on a few concepts that they've taught in previous years. But yeah, we really just want students to focus on issues that they're passionate about and issues that they can see happening in Hangzhou. And yeah, for the teacher, that can be quite intimidating. Teachers that aren't used to this style of learning might feel that they have to be experts in a variety of different areas. But actually, it's cool, because I hope that by the end of the unit, every student is able to teach me something. Like they get to the point where they learn enough to be able to teach me. I'm doing a little more input in the beginning of the unit in terms of teaching the design thinking cycle and providing some context for the current issues that are going on in China. But then towards the middle of the unit and towards the end of the unit, on a typical day, I can be found going from group to group with my iPad, just kind of sitting down with the group, seeing where they are, sketching out mind maps, and asking critical questions. Are you sure this is going to work? Have you tested this? Can you provide some evidence? Have you reached out to primary sources? Are you looking at social media for some answers to these questions? So yeah, it looks chaotic during most of the unit, but I can tell you with great confidence that when we have that charity gala, you've got a room of 30 students that are persuasively and passionately talking about their issue. And the issue continues after the unit. These students are passionate about these issues for the rest of the year, and we've had some really positive reports of students that continue pushing these issues even when they go back to Hong Kong.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. So Adam, talk to me a little bit about what, I mean, it's a fact of school. What assessment looks like? I mean, I know you have the gala at the end, which is amazing. But are kids receiving letter grades? Is it a competency-based assessment? Do you have specific rubric? Like, what does that look like as you're going through this process?
Yeah, so we have a rubric for this particular unit. We measure knowledge and understanding. So the students have a learning journal, which is a Google Doc that's shared with their group members and the teacher. And teachers are able to provide feedback and comments on that Google Doc. We look for, is there a wide range of sources? Have students analyze those sources to indicate, when did the source appear? Is it a reputable source? Do they have primary sources that they've reached out to? If they don't get a response, what's the next action that they take? So we look for the knowledge and understanding that they demonstrate. So basically what they've learned.
Yep.
And then we look at how they've learned it, and that's the research part of it. And then we look at how they're able to communicate that information. Is it a way that is appropriate for the audience? And we usually use some peer feedback to help with the grading. So the other students will provide a number score based on a rubric that indicates whether that resonated for them. And we're able to take results from the charity gala. If students received a large amount of money, then that tells us that they have created something that has resonated with the audience. Is it something that they've showed critical thinking? Have they added to their learning journal a mind map that shows their critical thinking? Have they shown how they've tested their product and use the results from that test to then go back and create a different version? It's not as straightforward, I'll be honest with you, as simply giving a 10 question quiz,
right? Yeah.
Which I've also done in the past. But if we're really going for meaningful learning here, this is the way to go.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing that I love about this is what you're talking about is we treat teachers like professionals, and exactly where the kids are, what the kids are thinking, and you don't need a, lack of a better term, standard assessment to tell you that. I mean, every teacher I talk to could probably point out every kid in their classroom and say, yeah, that's my A kid, or that's my 7 kid, and that's my 4 kid, and that kid is the one I have to work with all the time. Like, we just know that, right? And what you do is you're setting up a structure that allows you to be a professional, and you students still have to show evidence. There is still evidence involved, but that evidence isn't 10 questions on a quiz.
Right.
Here's my question to you, Adam. Could you ever go back to teaching in a regular classroom, like 7 periods a day, 15-minute periods? Could you ever go back to doing that after this, or do you just, or would you feel like you would lose something if you did that? I mean, you could, of course, we all could, but do you just feel like, what do you see the difference? Like, what's your difference between like that kind of traditional experience we have, and what in your words, what is the feeling and experience that you have as a teacher, in this kind of setup, and that feeling for students as well?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be one extreme or the other. I know that students in a very conventional classroom that is teacher directed, they have a thirst for this kind of flexibility and choice. But I also know that I've seen kind of the other extreme where it's all about students guiding their own learning and very little input from the teachers. And I've actually seen students wish for a little more teacher input and actually be glad when there's a short lecture from the teacher.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there's room for both.
Yeah.
And I think it might be dependent on the school setting, on the teacher, on the students. And yeah, there's, just like life, there's no one path.
I love that idea.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think especially here in my state, that's like the word of the year coming down from the state, is that we need to set up multiple paths for students to be successful. And so this idea that a path like this works for some kids, but even like you're saying, is some kids are saying, I wish it was a little more structured, for lack of a better term, in a way that, there's a little more teacher driven, and that works for some kids, right? That's a path that some kids need. And how do we allow, or how do we create a system that allows students different paths within the same structure that is school?
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So what does a unit look like? So you're going to finish this unit, and I can already tell that I already know there are probably some teachers listening to this are like, oh, this is amazing, but this is also just your culminating activity, right? This is not the way that school runs every day. Like, you're going to have this gala, and then after the gala, you're going to go back into a 7-period, 50 minutes a day, or do you? Like, what happens after this? Is there a new essential question? Is there you're now working with a different teacher, not the design teacher? Like, this is just the way school works, or is this just a project within the greater school setting?
Yeah, so this is a 32-hour project over the course of 5 weeks or so, and then I'll actually repeat this same project with another group of students
Oh, okay.
for another 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we'll start a new unit. Instead of partnering with design, I'll partner with science, and we're still working on what the unit's going to be about, but we're thinking energy, particularly solar power. There's been a big push in China now to implement solar energy and sustainability, and I think we're gonna go down that path. And I don't know, we might end up having students make their own solar panels. We might visit a car factory that's making electric cars. I'm not really sure. We're working on this unit right now, and we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's great.
I hear there's a big new one right outside of Shanghai. You can take your kids to.
Oh yeah, they just the new Tesla factory. Right?
Yeah. Gigafactory 3 just started.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea, and Shanghai's not too far away, and yeah, we love taking a little trip there and getting some good food that we don't always have.
Yeah. And you have the bullet train, right? You've got the bullet train. You guys can get there now, and
we do. It's crazy. It feels like you're flying in an airplane, very low to the ground. Yeah, these super fast trains in China. It's amazing what they've been able to build in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
I know. I'm jealous every time I think about what was being built when I left China, when I left Shanghai in 2008. And I've been back to China a couple times since then. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, life would have been so much easier. Like, it's just incredible. The roads, the infrastructure, just stuff that was being built that's now there. It's just incredible.
The internet is still a struggle.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was a problem when you were here, but
It had just started to be a problem. They just
Okay.
started locking stuff down. Hence the
Yeah.
reason I moved to Bangkok.
Yeah, the Great Firewall prevents us
Yeah.
from accessing a lot of websites that we're used to. So we often have to have a plan B and a plan C when it comes to using certain tech tools in class.
Yeah. I will tell you this though, the Great Firewall of China is not as restrictive as our public schools here in the United States.
Yeah.
That we filter our kids at schools way more filtered than you are in China. And yet you get all the news and nobody's talking about the handicap we do to kids in schools.
Yeah,
here
I think
in
you
the
can make a
States.
pretty strong case there.
Yeah, don't get Jeff started.
Oh, don't get me started. I've lived on both sides of that wall, and I can tell you, our kids here are way more at a disadvantage than your kids behind that Great Firewall.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and chatting with us about your school and the setup there. And I just love this because the school I've been working with this week is actually designing a new section of their high school that they want to be project-based learning. And they're really struggling with what does that look like? And how can you do this? And are there schools out here that have a different bell system, that have a different way that teaching can look for 32 hours? And how do you rotate kids through that? Like, I love that idea that you've got these small groups of kids that really get to hone in and focus on something for an extended period of time. And then it's a new set of kids, and you can take the same set of kids through that section, and then you partner with another teacher and do a different topic. And I think that's just such a great approach. And it is something I feel like can be implemented at any school.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a big part of it is making sure that it's authentic, making sure you give students a lot of choice, and being willing to be flexible with your time and leave some time in the schedule for kids to fail, because that's really what's needed in order to they really need the time and the space to try something without the risk of having it, negatively affect their scores.
I love that.
Yeah.
I so agree.
And I be okay with it being messy.
Yeah. And I think also as a teacher, you have to be willing to fail, try something, iterate, be able to be honest with kids saying, ooh, that didn't work today, or that didn't work. We're going to try this different. Like, you have a new set of 9 kids coming in and, 32 hours later, or 10 kids coming in, to be able to say like, oh, well, here's what we learned from the last ones that we're going to adjust or structure more or unstructure more based on feedback. And so as a teacher, you also have to be a constant learner as well and be willing to adjust. And I think that's something that I love that has come out of your conversation today too, is that, like you said, this is the 6th time you've done it and it doesn't look the same, and it never will, And I the thing I'm always telling teachers is you have to get to a place where you are okay constantly being a beginner. And we have to understand that in this fast-paced world that we find ourselves in, you're never going to master anything again. And that either excites you or freaks you out, right?
Yeah.
And if you live in a world where that excites you, it allows you to innovate quickly. And you're just like, oh, that tried, failed. Like you're saying, space and time to fail, try again, not be judged by your failure, try it again, fix it, and move on.
Yeah, what the students are doing in the classroom has to represent what they're going to be doing once they leave that classroom.
Yeah, I agree.
Love it. Yeah.
Transferable skills.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Adam. We will let you go. You're getting ready to start your Thursday morning there, Wednesday night for us here. So, excellent. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I always know how hard it is as teachers to get away and make space for your own reflection and your own time to share. So we really appreciate it. And I know Chris had to run home from school to be here as well. So,
running through meetings. Yep.
Yeah, Chris, I appreciate it as well. So
absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate the time for conversation.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Love being here.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Shifting Our Schools with your host, Jeff Udick. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit sospodcast.org, facebook.com/Jeff Udick, and on Twitter @JUdick. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Shifting Our Schools.